got a list of the top 10 elements that you're going to want to consider when you're purchasing a unique rural off-grid property that will save you a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of frustration and a lot of headaches when you purchase rural boat access only, helicopter access only sort of property, private island, you name it. This list covers it. The number one tip that I have is making sure that it's actually something that you would want to live in and use. There's a whole bunch of different uses that people have for their recreational properties. Some people want to have horses at their property. Some people want to go fishing at their property. Some people want to have a community for their kids at the property. There's a whole bunch of different ways that a property can be suitable for some people and not others. And so making sure that you are buying a property that suits your needs is probably the number one most important thing in my opinion. Now, zoning and land use really impacts just how big of a home that you can build there, what future plans are that you might be able to do, and then even just the property's value. For instance, there are 100-acre parcels that will allow for just one single dwelling. So if you're wanting to have a small guest cabin in addition to maybe the several thousand square foot cabin that might already be there, there could be restrictions on this. And so depending on what you're looking for, it's really crucial to check and make sure that the zoning matches up with what you want to do in the future. Other key one is access. Now, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can access a whole bunch of different properties. What I often sell are boat access only properties where you need a boat. But even within that, there's a lot of different categories. Some of them have, water taxis that have scheduled runs to the various different areas, and there's kind of an easy way of you not actually have to own a boat, even though it's a boat access only property. Versus others, you definitely need to have a boat to get there, and even then, it can be tricky if there's no dock or if there's just a mooring buoy. Or no mooring buoy at all. Access is also important when you consider building. A lot of, especially if the waterfront sites will have various different barge landing areas. If they have something like this and a road that gets you right to your property, well, it's a hell of a lot easier to build on that property than it is to build on, let's just say, the neighbor's property. The fourth consideration is just what's the water source. Now, a lot of these different properties will have a whole bunch of different water sources. Those can be a stream that you're feeding off of. They can be a well, and there's deep wells, shallow wells. They can be rainwater collection off the roof, or they can have kind of a more of a community cistern type system that's all set up. So knowing exactly what the water source is, and also the potability. A lot of places will have E. coli issues, arsenic issues. It doesn't necessarily mean you can't deal with them, but it may be costly to do. So knowing what you're getting into and having the water checked if there's already some running water is really important. Now, the fifth key element is septic and waste and garbage. Now, for septic fields, there's a whole bunch of different systems that can be out there, and just knowing about what government regulations surround septic fields, whether knowing it's an approved septic field or it's not approved and doesn't have those kind of right approvals is important. Some properties will have connected power. Often the power does go out for long extended periods of time, and so having a backup system, whether that be a generator or some solar panels, is something that you're going to want to consider. Some properties won't have any connection to the grid whatsoever, and so knowing kind of the capacity of those systems, does the current system that's been used largely for recreational use fit your needs if you're planning to use it full time, is really an important question to ask and to try and determine. And it's often you might not be able to find out a full answer to some of these questions, but having a general sense is better than nothing. Now, another kind of on that same tangent is internet access. Now, some properties will have various different rural connections. There's, of course, Elon Musk's Starlink that is kind of as a backup, but Starlink's realistically quite expensive and not necessarily for everybody, especially if you're planning to just use it for 1 or 2 months a year. And so having some kind of system, whether or not it's just you can call on your phone or have kind of cellular data off the phone if you've got some reception, or if it's further out, having some kind of system can be really important for some buyers and totally cross off some properties depending on what you're looking for. Knowing just where the property boundaries are is very important, especially the waterfront will have very narrow lots that, while it might be 3-5 acres and you think, well, that's a lot, it might just be this very, very narrow strip that goes right up the mountain. And so knowing just kind of what those property boundaries are and knowing that not all 3 acres is created equal. Of course, some will have topography issues on top of that. There can be very flat 3-acre lots that are good for gardening, and this goes back to the uses. And then there could be very steep cliff-like 3-acre lots with just a 10,000 square foot building site or something along those lines. The eighth point I want to mention is environmental factors. Now, a lot of these properties, especially the inland ones that are in especially very high wildfire risk areas, they might have really hard problems getting insurance, which will impact your ability to get a mortgage. And so, knowing what environmental factors go into each property is one of the most important considerations that is out there. Now, archaeological concerns can be very small. There can be portions of a lot that might be restricted by a potential archaeological site that may not have been evaluated at this point. And so knowing whether or not the property that you're purchasing has an archaeological site on it, and if that site is right in the most obvious building site on the land, or if it's just in the back corner. The 10th point is always the most fun, which is legal details. Now, there are a whole bunch of different legal details that will impact recreational properties. Now, these can be easements, covenants, rights of way that will give you the access through somebody else's property, or potentially even have something like the neighbor's septic field is on your property, or the neighbor shares rights to your well, or something along those lines. Also, dock issues can be a very large one in terms of legal issues, particularly if there's not an approved dock and there's just a dock that is kind of an unauthorized dock, which is so frequent in Howe Sound in particular. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a problem right away, but you might have a problem in 10 or 20 years, or even in 5 years, depending on the nature of what's been put in there. Now, my closing tip is to really be doing your homework. Now, this means everything from consulting knowledgeable realtors such as myself that can advise and guide you through this process, to contacting surveyors or geotechnical assessors, and making sure, especially on island properties where there's a lot of different things that could go wrong, might go wrong, and probably will go wrong at some point, that you're not going to have any surprises at the end of the day.